If you would like to be a Zionista male or female, we started out as Christian and Jewish women's support for Israel, but we actually have a lot of guys in there too. So if you would like to join us, just give us your email and we'll be happy to put you on a list and come to all our meetings. Tonight we are really proud to have Laurie Cardoza-Moore here. She's a big draw, so we're really glad that you came to hear her. But right now, I'm going to let David Moldau take the stand and introduce our speaker, Laurie Cardoza-Moore. Thank you, David.
I want to tell you a little bit about Laurie, who's become a nice, very good friend now. And she is a housewife living in Nashville, Tennessee, mother of 5 children. A few years ago, namely on November 2001, she changed from the focus that she did have to now concentrating on Israel, and is the founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, PJTN. She's made, I think, 3 movies, maybe more. I've watched her last 2, and they're terrific, and they'll be available at the end of the evening on a table somewhere for purchase. Laurie has testified before the United Nations, and I thought back, I don't think I've ever testified before the United Nations. She's also testified before the legislature in Tennessee on 2 different topics, and we're so fortunate that she's joining us this evening. So without further ado, I'd like you all to join me in welcoming Laurie Cardoza-Moore.
I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you for that warm welcome. It's good to see Ron and Lisa Wagner here tonight, and to see other Pastor Diaz came out, so we're grateful to have you, and I know there's members of his congregation here, as you can hear the whistles and the hoots out there. But I want to just, I want to thank you all for being here, and Wallace just came up to me about 10 minutes ago, his alert. How many of you have the red alerts on your iPhone or on your smartphone? Yeah. Well, there was just another missile attack in Sderot from Gaza again. You know, as if things couldn't be bad enough here with the recent deal of the Obama administration with Iran. Now we have Hamas. You know, is this going to be the start of an all-out assault again, another war against Israel? You know, we are so fortunate here in the United States to have great Americans like every one of you sitting in this room who care deeply about the future of our country and the nation of Israel. The last time I was in town, I was invited by Mike Skubiak, and Mike, thank you. By the way, so you all know, Act for America does have a table back here, so please, if you haven't signed up, if you want to get some more information, there's some materials back there, please help yourself to that. We've got some of the DVDs for the films that we produce. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But I want to recognize a couple, because I can come and speak to all of you, and I can share with you all the problems, the woes of the world, and I can tell you what we can do about it. But I can't make you get up, leave this room tonight, and do something in your sphere of influence. There's a couple here tonight that I want to recognize who fought and stood up against textbooks being used in Seminole County. They have a child in the school system. They didn't have to take on this issue, but they chose to. And they're an example of what can happen if just one person would do something. Ron and Lisa Wagner, would you please stand up so we can recognize you? Thank you. And we're going to talk, because the textbook issue is far from over. And for those of you, how many of you were at the last meeting that we had with Mike Skubiak? So you were here to hear about the textbooks. How many of you are aware, and we're going to talk about BDS tonight, But you have to understand that BDS didn't happen in a vacuum. We have been priming our kids with historically inaccurate information, anti-Semitic propaganda for years in our schools. And we wonder why our children get on college campuses and they become part of this movement, this anti-Israel, this Israel apartheid demonstrations. How many of you are aware of what's happening on college campuses? It's a growing problem, not just for the Jewish students, but even for the Christian Zionist students as well. And if we don't speak up and do something, if we don't become active like Ron and Lisa in targeting the textbooks, we will lose the future of this country. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and I serve as the president and founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. And as was mentioned, I also serve as a special envoy to the United Nations for the World Council of Independent Christian Churches. So why would a nice girl like me, who's trying to run a business, go up to the United Nations, right? I mean, it is the den of anti-Semitic, anti-American belief system structure. They're not very pro-West there. Well, I went because I believe that the Lord had called me to be there. There's Archbishop Dr. John Lapoli, who is the founder of the World Council of Independent Christian Churches, saw some of my interviews. He started following me on Facebook, and he signed up to get my emails. And probably a year after we had met, he contacted me and he said, how would you like to go to do what you do at the United Nations for World Council of Independent Christian Churches? I said, oh my gosh, I would love to. I would get to go into that den of anti-Semites and call them out publicly. So of course he gave me the position and I accepted it. And it's been an interesting journey, I must say. They don't like seeing me walk in the room when I come to the conferences now, when the NGOs are invited with the Secretary General and his staff. They know I'm going to be the one to bring up anti-Semitism. Our mission at Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, which was founded in 2005, was to educate Christians about their biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel. Well, you would think, and we all know there are many evangelical Christians, but the majority of Christians, unfortunately, don't hear about Israel from the pulpit. I have spoken and contacted pastors. Pastor Diaz, we have to recognize this man because he is a mensch. He is a gem. This is a pastor that will speak about Israel, about the truth of who the Jewish people are and our responsibility to stand with our brethren. He takes tours of Christians over to Israel all the time. Every time I get a text message from Norm Sargent, one of his congregants, and he says, Pastor's over in Israel again. But this is a pastor who believes the Word of God and preaches the truth. But I've had pastors tell me, oh no, we don't talk about that because that's too political. And I say, Pastor, the world makes Israel political. God makes Israel biblical. Amen. Israel is the apple of his eye. But our goal is to educate Christians to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of the new anti-Semitism. And one of the new forms of anti-Semitism is BDS, or boycott, divestment, and sanctions. You know, during the Cold War, President Truman termed his overt peacetime media offensive against the Soviets as a campaign of truth. His campaign included utilizing Hollywood films, documentaries, radio broadcasts, and print media. Truman knew that if he could give the people the simple, unvarnished truth, he could turn the tide in our favor. At PJTN, we leverage our award-winning media to execute a campaign of biblical truth. Sorry, there we go. Technology. Our target audience obviously is Christians. So these films that you see up here, these are all produced for a Christian audience. We always have scriptures to back up the truth that we are presenting in our messaging, so that Christians understand, even if they haven't heard it from their pastors, or even if they haven't heard it from the pulpits, they know it where it is in the Word of God, because we introduce them to it. We show them chapter and verse in context. PJTN's goal is to erect a firewall around Israel and our Jewish brethren, with tens of millions of Christians standing at the ready. PJTN is dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism on many fronts and by utilizing all of our assets. Our first asset is our original media productions and global distribution. PJTN utilizes the most powerful medium of our day. We accomplish our mission by producing award-winning programs and distributing them globally. Our arsenal includes several Emmy-nominated award-winning documentaries and a weekly 30-minute television program focused on Israel. I also have the honor of serving on the President's Council of the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. If you are not familiar with NRB, the NRB is the largest Christian broadcasters convention in the world. They have as many as 3,000 global media broadcasters. They gather together every year in Nashville. We have an 8-year partnership with NRB, and that has enabled PJTN to air its award-winning films and programs through 10 media outlets, reaching over 900 million homes in over 200 countries. PJTN's media outreach includes fighting the PR war against Israel on radio and TV through interviews around the world. And finally, PJTN is confronting the BDS movement by exposing anti-Semitic organizations on college campuses. BDS is the newest weapon of global genocidal anti-Semitism, and PJTN is committed to fighting. The fuel that drives BDS is disinformation, lies that are spread through the media, through anti-Semitic groups, and even in school textbooks, like we talked about. So how is PJTN combating the anti-Semitic BDS movement? We're challenging BDS on 3 fronts: through legislation, through the production of media aimed at the millennial generation, because remember, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just the Jewish children and the secular children. The Christian children are buying into this propaganda as well. It's very frightening, and they're being aided by Christian leaders and Christian publications like Relevant Magazine that is being produced or published for the millennial generation, that's promoting a pro-Palestinian narrative, or what would Jesus do, and accusing Israel of occupying Palestinian land. But the third way we're confronting this issue is through our K-12 textbook initiative, which we talked about, Ron and Lisa. The anti-BDS battle is a battle for the hearts and minds of billions of people, and none more important than our students on college campuses and in our public schools. Many young people today buy into the BDS narrative because they are disinformed. They believe what they read in their textbooks, and they hear from their teachers and professors. We believe that if we can confront and stop the lies taught to our children in the K-12 years, then they will not fall prey for the BDS garbage on our college campuses. In November of 2012, a concerned PJTN watchman contacted me about a controversial human geography textbook. It was called The Cultural Landscape. It was being used in her son's school. The immediate concern involved a section under the title, Terrorism by Individuals and Organizations, that asked the students to consider the following question about why terrorism has increased. And the quote is, if a Palestinian suicide bomber kills several dozen Israeli teenagers in a Jerusalem restaurant, is that an act of terrorism? or wartime retaliation against Israeli government policies and army actions. Two students had a stunning comment to the quote. One student questioned his faith, and this is a 9th grade class. These are 9th graders. We think by then we're convinced by educators, oh, these kids can understand, they can comprehend, we want them to think critically. Well, two children, one questioned his faith, and this is the young man who is a friend of mine, he's a member of our organization. This young man was in Bible study with my kids, he was homeschooled, but he got into public school, this was his first year in public school, and he was in this history class, and this was presented to him with some handouts that had similar propaganda comments in it, and he came home questioning who has legal right to the land of Israel. And of course his mom said, what does the Bible say? He says, no, I know, Mom. But who really has rights to the land? Do you see how important this is? And how many hours a day do these educators get our children? And how many hours of the day do we have with them to influence? Or are we sitting down talking? But another student walked out of the class. He wasn't as well versed biblically about Israel, and he had said that had he not taken this class, he would have never known about the dangerous Zionist agenda. Now, keep this in mind. This is happening in a school, Williamson County Schools, which is the district I live in Tennessee. It is the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. It is the hub of evangelical Christianity. And it's one of the top 10 most conservative, wealthiest counties in the country. So how does a textbook like this, or with rhetoric like that, end up in one of the most conservative, one of the top 10 conservative counties? The buckle of the Bible Belt. When the school board refused to reconsider using the textbook because of the anti-Semitic content, PJTN developed and executed a strategy to remove it. For the sake of time, I won't go into the details of that effort, but as a result of our media and grassroots campaign targeting the school board, the superintendent, and Pearson Publishers. How many of you know about Pearson Publishers? Pearson is one of the largest textbook publishing companies in the world. And Pearson is not American-based. It is British-based. They are teaching European culture, European anti-Semitism to American children now. We expose Pearson's history and their religious editor, Shabir Mansouri, whose mission, and I quote, is to wage a bloodless revolution in American schools. By the way, you all have Pearson textbooks in Florida, and Ron and Lisa can tell you what they found in their son's Pearson textbook. We launched our media campaign 2 months before Pearson's Publishers' busiest season of the year, when school districts across the U.S. would be purchasing textbooks in an effort to affect their bottom line. And guess what? We did. Within a couple of weeks of launching our global media campaign, we were invited on Fox and Friends to expose the textbook, with other media outlets picking up the story as well, including the Washington Times and Al Jazeera America. So as a result of our media campaign, we secured the support of the state legislature in Tennessee and introduced and passed legislation to change the way Tennessee reviews, adopts, and approves textbooks. We told our school board members that if they did not remove the textbook from our children's schools in Williamson County, that we would remove them from office. And guess what? We did. The last election cycle. All of those school board members who voted to keep that textbook that were up for re-election, they're gone. And we worked to find people in the community like us. We the people. Citizens to serve, to run for office and actually serve on the school board. It hasn't been an easy ride, let me tell you. But we did it. It's grassroots. But that's not all. In November of 2013, the British-based Pearson Publishers, the largest textbook publishing company in the world, agreed to remove the anti-Semitic quote from future editions. Think about this. They sell 60% of Pearson's sales are in the US. The Libyan government owns 26 million shares of Pearson's stock. And recently, two of Pearson's London-based staff contacted members of our group. They're requesting a meeting with us. Why? Because they can't sell their textbooks in Tennessee schools. A media campaign to expose them worked in Tennessee, because other school districts, we've got 50 counties of the 95 in Tennessee, where we have parents and citizens who are actively ready, again, grassroots, to get involved. And now these school districts across the state, they're rethinking whether they're going to use Pearson textbooks because of all the negative press. This textbook is not just being used in Tennessee, as I said, it is being used in all 50 states. We mobilize parents and citizens in 50 counties, as I said, across the state, and they're prepared to file a lawsuit. They're demanding that our textbooks be historically accurate, unbiased, reflect our values, and not violate our U.S. and state constitutions by favoring the establishment of one religion over all others. And can you guess what that religion is?
Oh, yeah.
Islam, in our textbook, had 37 pages. Judaism, 17. Christianity, 13. You would think when you study the religion of Islam that it is the dominant religion, even in the United States. But because of my appearance on Fox and Friends and our initiative to spread to 7 states, I was just on the phone this week with several leaders who are fighting the textbook battle in states across the country. And these individuals are meeting with an attorney, with our attorney, talking about doing tort lawsuits in several states that are using these textbooks. But within 6 months of launching this all-out assault against Pearson and its anti-Semitic textbook, Bloomberg News reported that Pearson's stock in North America was declining, and by January of 2014, Pearson Publishers had to reduce its staff in North America because of declining sales. But our momentum doesn't stop there, because that's just the beginning. As I said, BDS doesn't happen in a vacuum. Last year, after being informed that the Students for Justice in Palestine, how many of you are familiar with SJP? Students for Justice in Palestine. How about Muslim Student Association? These are organizations that are operating as groups or clubs on our students' college campuses. And you have them on many of Florida's state campuses. We found out that they were organizing on Tennessee university campuses, so we decided to confront the anti-Semites on our schools of higher learning head on. I thought, you know what, if we can do this with the textbooks, let's take them on with BDS. So we decided it was time to leverage our relationships at our state legislature to stop the BDS in Tennessee before it takes root. Because at this time, at this period of time, we had not had an incident like what you've had on Florida's university campuses. How many of you are familiar with what's happening on FAU's campus? There's been a lot of demonstrations, die-ins, putting eviction notices on Jewish students' dorm doors, Israel apartheid demonstrations. This is happening on several college campuses across the state of Florida. So we're going to focus tonight primarily on this state, because I am believing that all of you are going to walk out of this room and get involved in this battle in some capacity. But why choose the state legislature, and why a resolution? The state legislature is the body, the governing body that oversees our college campuses, our universities. We should be leveraging the relationships that we have with our state legislators in order to confront this issue and stop it. Our PJTN team contacted Stand With Us. Now, how many of you are familiar with Stand With Us? Stand With Us is an organization that is heavily involved in college campuses. They're based out of California, but they have some of the best materials on anti-Semitism, on BDS, on their website. You can go to Stand With Us or SWU.com to get more information. But it's a great resource for you to learn about what's happening on BDS. So our PJTN contacted Stand With Us to request their assistance in drafting a resolution that would condemn the anti-Semitic BDS movement and restate Tennessee's unequivocal support for the State of Israel. The resolution that we drafted came out of New York State. That was the foundation, the language that we used. There was a state senator, New York State Senator Klein, was going to introduce a bill in the state of New York that would basically penalize and shut down any student group on college campuses in the state that were state funded if they were engaged in this BDS movement or Israel apartheid demonstrations. But unfortunately, the language in the legislation would not pass constitutional muster. So we took the language of the bill and we had it drafted by our attorneys and Stand With Us into a resolution to basically communicate what they were trying to legislate. And we chose Tennessee to be the first state because Tennessee is a state where we had not had a problem with confronting BDS on our college campuses. We did know that we have two groups, Students for Justice in Palestine groups and the Muslim Student Association on a couple of our campuses, but they had been pretty quiet, not active. We weren't seeing the die-ins. We weren't seeing the Israel apartheid demonstrations. So we decided to launch a media campaign along with introducing a resolution to start educating the grassroots, people like you and I, because most people do not know what boycott, divestment, and sanctions means. They don't understand that it's targeting Israel. It's accusing Israel of apartheid demonstrations. They could be, the BDS movement could be boycotting the academia or economic boycotts. In fact, recently a Supreme Court justice in Israel termed BDS political terrorism. And it is, because what the ultimate goal is to try to put a stranglehold on the country by cutting off revenue to starve them, essentially. It is the newest form of anti-Semitism, and we're seeing these violent demonstrations happening against the Jewish students and the Christian students on our college campuses. But because we hadn't had a problem, we thought, you know what, let's do this here. Ironically, we put out a press release to start our media campaign to start informing the public across the state. And that weekend, after we put out the press release, there was an incident on Vanderbilt's campus where swastikas were spray painted on the AEPI Jewish fraternity building. Not only were they spray painted on the outside of the building, they got into the building, went down to the basement floor, and spray painted a swastika on the door to essentially tell the Jewish students on Vanderbilt's campus that you're not safe on this campus and you're not safe in your building either. And so as soon as that story broke, I printed up several copies. I went down to the legislature the following week, and I started going from legislator to legislator, asking them to sign on and to support this resolution to condemn BDS, to expose SJP and MSA as anti-Semitic groups that were promoting this hatred and violence on our college campuses. And guess what? When I asked the legislators if they were familiar with BDS, every one of them said no. I took the article of the Vanderbilt situation, or what had just happened on Vanderbilt's campuses, the swastikas. I said, so did you hear what happened on Vanderbilt's campus this weekend? And they said, yeah, that was terrible. I said, that's BDS. That's what this resolution is going to address. They said, let me sign on. We were able to pass that resolution in both the House and the Senate overwhelmingly with only one dissenting vote. So it was bipartisan. We had both sides of the aisle. Everybody agreed that this was a problem, and we did not want this. We didn't want incidents like what happened on Vanderbilt's campus to happen on others. The resolution also stated Tennessee's long history of supporting Israel in the war on terror. After launching our global media campaign about our resolution, and AE Pi's Vanderbilt campus was spray painted, we also had an incident where one of the local synagogues, which was right down the street from Vanderbilt's campus, was shot at. This is all within a week's time. It's still under investigation. We don't know who did it, but it seems odd that that would have all happened within a week's time. After Tennessee passed our resolution, and after it went public that we had introduced this resolution, there was a legislator from Indiana who contacted us and said, we want that bill, we want that resolution for our state. Indiana ended up passing their resolution 2 days after ours. As of today, because of our media campaign, and because of people like you, we now have 41 states and 7 countries who have requested Tennessee's resolution to introduce in their state legislature or in their parliament. So now let's take a little sneak peek. I want to show you because we have to start reaching the younger generation. We get it. We're here because we want to be educated, we want to be informed. But now we've got to reach the younger generation, and we've got to show them what BDS really is. The next documentary, as you know, we produce award-winning films because media is the way to communicate to this generation. If we're going to reach our kids, it's going to be through this medium. So Stan, let's go ahead and we're going to show this is a short 4-5-minute clip, a trailer of our next documentary film. The title says Israel, the apartheid state, ? This is a working title. We're using this title as bait to do interviews with people to show the world who these people that are pushing BDS really are. We are in the process, in fact, we were in Israel a couple months ago starting filming of it, but we are still in the process of trying to raise the funding to finish it in time for the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, which is in February of 2016, where we will premiere it. And of course, as we're targeting this millennial generation, which is so critically important, we're using a style in the film industry called docutainment. And it's going to also feature a political comedian, which you saw, who, Brad Stein, is well known in Christian circles. The film, of course, is going to be funny, dark, entertaining, and of course, informative. Our goal is to not only have this documentary screen on as many campuses as possible, but also in theaters in college towns across the U.S. We will also take segments of the film and push it out in 3 to 4 minute, 5-minute segments on social media. In closing, PJTN's comprehensive strategy involves combating lies and disinformation in the media, public schools, college campuses, at the UN, and at religious institutions. I'm sure you all noticed the different denominations and Hobby Lobby that was in that trailer clip. Unfortunately, the Green family, who one son supports propaganda films, the other son is supporting Christians going to Israel. And we're doing some research about this dichotomy that's going on within the Green family because I find it extremely confusing and disturbing at the same time that the wealth from the Green family is going to fund both ends of this issue. So that will eventually come out in this documentary as well. PJTN now has the capacity to reach hundreds of millions of Christians and people of conscience around the globe. Each year, that number grows with PJTN as the world's only pro-Israel organization with the support of the NRB and access to the United Nations and the Vatican. There are just some things Christian organizations can do that Jewish organizations can't. And with your financial support, we will. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for making the investment of time I want to have, I think we have some time for Q&A. So if any of you have questions about what we've talked about here tonight, I don't know that we have an extra mic, but if you want to stand up and just speak loud enough so that others in the audience can hear from you as well. Yes, Connie.
Laurie, homeschools, is that also Pearson books?
Fortunately for homeschool families, we get to choose what textbooks we want to use. And typically, a lot of homeschool families do not use Pearson published textbooks. They use, most homeschool families approach education from a classical perspective, and Pearson does not fit that bill. So thank you, Connie. Next. Yes, sir.
Do you have literature or handout materials with these websites and references?
If you want to go to our website, you can write this down, pjtn.org. On the website, we have 2 pages. One is for the BDS initiative that we are launching. And if you go to that page, there's plenty of materials you can download. There's the resolution. Basically, we have everything on that page that you will need in order to successfully launch an initiative in your community. And I want to talk to you about what the state of Florida is doing with regards to BDS, and we'll talk a little bit about the textbook initiative as well. So there's also a page for the textbook initiative. The BDS page has all the states listed, and as people are coming on board, we're putting those people's names, their contact information, so that all the different states, people can go to those states, contact the leader of that state that's heading up this BDS initiative, and get involved on a grassroots level. PJTN doesn't come, I can't come to Florida and help you fight this battle. You have to fight the battle. This is your territory. These are your state legislators. They're your school board members. You have to fight this battle. So, yes.
Can you talk about who originated the Common Core curriculum?
She wants to know about who originated the Common Core curriculum. Pearson Publishers is behind Common Core. And just to highlight, if you want to see what Common Core is about, we keep hearing that Common Core is about higher standards, right? That's the rhetoric we've been given. It's not about higher standards, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, we were told for many years that Common Core would not affect the curriculum. It wouldn't affect the textbooks. Well, you know what? Bill Gates finally admitted publicly that when you control the standards at the top and you control the testing at the bottom, eventually the curriculum and the textbooks will come in line. And all you have to do is open up your textbooks and look at the propaganda. It's globalization standards, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the standards and the values that made the Judeo-Christian values that this nation was based upon and built upon. So it's critically important for you to understand that you can't buy into this narrative and this rhetoric. And the only way we're going to be able to stop it is to confront it head on in our communities. I want to just share with you a quick analogy that as I was praying one day when we were fighting the textbook battle, but it applies to BDS as well. It's the Nehemiah principle. And if you all remember the book of Nehemiah, if you read that book, and I encourage you to read it, because it's so full of the strategy that we can launch, that we launched in Tennessee that was successful. But Nehemiah, after being given the authority by the king to go back and rebuild the walls that had been torn down around Jerusalem, symbolically remembering the walls represent the security of a city, he came back, he assessed the damage, and then he came up with a strategy. He went to the leaders of districts, he went to people who lived in front of sections of the wall, he convinced all of them to just rebuild their section. Don't worry about what your neighbor's doing in the next county over or the county to your left. Just rebuild your community. Start with your school boards, because this is where education begins. And remember, this is the future. If we don't ground our children and teach them about the Constitution and about the values that made this nation great. And not only that, about our historic relationship with Israel, which we used to teach in our textbooks. If we don't teach that to our children, there will be no one to pass the baton to. We will lose our freedoms. We will lose this country. There will be no ally. Wallace was saying to me earlier about a t-shirt that says, that we should all have, that says to Americans, America, Israel's got your back. Well, we're glad somebody does, Wallace. But I'm telling you that this is the strategy, and this is what we implemented, and now we have, because we went from county to county in Tennessee, we have 50 counties engaged now. And that's what I'm trying to do, is go from county to county across the state of Florida and remind every one of you that Jeb Bush is behind Common Core. I don't want to get into politics. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I am only going to tell you that when we were trying to stop Common Core, because we saw what was the evidence in the textbooks, when we saw that anti-Semitic quote, and when we heard that Jeb Bush was pushing this, we decided in Tennessee to launch an all-out assault against the textbooks in Common Core. And Jeb Bush came up to Tennessee knowing what we were doing in our state legislature, and he pulled in all the Republican leadership because we have a supermajority in Tennessee. He pulled them all together in the Speaker's office and told them why they should be supporting Common Core. He was trying to undermine what the citizens, what we the people of our own state were demanding of our state legislature. He was coming in from the outside to try to railroad what we were trying to do. We should not, in Tennessee, when Al Gore ran for president, because we knew his policies would be dangerous, we lived with him. We wouldn't let him carry the state. I hope Florida will send a message to Jeb Bush that we won't tolerate globalization standards that are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel and accuse Israel of occupying Palestinian land, when the Bible clearly states that God gave that land to them and that it is His.
There weren't any Palestinians in that land until Israel made it profitable for them.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Would it be beneficial to contact the Vice President of Student Affairs at your alma mater and ask them about what's going on with BDS and write the Alumni Association suggesting that your donation to the university may cease?
So let's boycott our university campuses if they allow this behavior to go on. And I would encourage you to take it another step further. Go to our website, download a copy of the resolution, and ask their governing body to adopt that resolution on their campus. If you have a church, you should adopt the resolution. Synagogues should adopt the resolution. We should get all different types, county bodies, city, go to the leaders and ask them to take this resolution and adopt it. But I will tell you that with regards to the BDS campaign in the state of Florida, we are working with a young gentleman, Derek Silver, who's been up there, and we're supposed to have a Senate sponsor and a House sponsor next week. So if you will also come and sign up to get on our mailing list, we will put you in the state of Florida list, and we will be sending out emails to keep you informed as to what's going on and what you can do. We are going to have a rally at the state capitol at some point in January. We're not sure, but I want you to think about this. We have 41 states. Our goal is to have all 50 states adopt this resolution. 4 states, Tennessee, Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York, have already passed their resolutions. The rest of the states will be introducing their resolution come January 1. Remember, this is to condemn BDS on our college campuses and stand with Israel, because basically it's a resolution to support, to further communicate our support for the state of Israel in the state of Florida. But we will be launching a media campaign simultaneously to help you in Florida. As you launch out on this initiative, we will use our 650 global media outlets to communicate this message to. And I will tell you, this BDS campaign has gone global. We have been getting emails from people all over, like I said, all over the world in 7 countries. I received a phone call from a UK attorney yesterday who wants to talk about introducing this resolution in their parliament. This effort is it's like fighting an asymmetrical war. As we continue to mobilize and communicate what other states are doing, people want to be part of a successful campaign. People want to be part of a winning team. And the more people see other countries coming on board or more states coming on board, other people are signing up to get engaged. But you can't just say, yes, I want to do it, and then drop the ball. You've got to be consistent, and you've got to fight to do this to the very end. I will promise you, as it says in Genesis 12:3, we all have to remember this, that God told Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you, and all the nations of the world will bless themselves by you. That is a national blessing. That is a blessing for a country or a nation. It is also a blessing for a state. And I believe we've passed 3 resolutions to support the state of Israel in the state of Tennessee since 2002. And I believe the hand of God has been on our state. We look at a lot of the things that are going on across this country. But if Florida ever needed a blessing, this is a way to do it. And I know Florida has been very active in supporting Israel over the years. So anyone next? Yes, sir.
Can you give some specific examples of White House investment and sanctions, particularly with a Christian denomination, so we know specific examples of what we're up against?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the most recent I can point to is this past summer. The Episcopal, the United Church of Christ, and the Mennonite churches had their conferences. Last summer, the Presbyterian Church had their conferences. And what are they taking up at these conferences? Divestment efforts against the state of Israel. So what they're basically doing, and I have not read about, I think Church of Christ passed theirs. I have not read if the Episcopal Church passed its divestment measure. But the Mennonite Church decided to table the motion for 2 years to look into it. So that is at least a promising sign that they're willing to look and rethink maybe the possibility of divestiture. But basically what they're doing is their investments, the money that they have, they're investing in businesses and companies. And what the protocol now for these churches, these denominations like the Presbyterian Church, is that they will not invest any of their church dollars into any business that's doing business in Israel or with Israel. That's a most recent example. Yes, Chris.
Laurie, I feel compelled to say that the Presbyterian Church is comprised of several denominations, and I think the one you're describing is the PCUSA. I'm a member of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, and we left the PCUSA over this issue. So.
Now, is this the one that just happened, the split that happened like 2 years ago?
Yes.
Or was it last year?
2 years.
Okay, so Chris is exactly right, and I want to just clarify what he just said. There are different sects of Presbyterianism. There's the PCA, which my husband and I used to be part of it. There's the USA, which is more mainline, more liberal in its belief. They don't necessarily believe the inerrancy of God's word. But the more evangelical you find, these Presbyterian groups or mainline denominations are the groups that you will find that believe in the inerrancy of God's word and believe that God is still in relationship with Israel, with the Jewish people. But unfortunately, when I was involved at the PCA church in Nashville, I had asked a pastor, my pastor at the time, if he would come speak at a rally to support Israel when we were introducing a resolution. And he kind of just smirked and looked down and he said, "Oh no, you don't want me there." And he walked off, and I said to my husband, who was standing next to me, I said, did you think that he didn't like my idea? And Stan says to me, "I don't think he's going to speak, Laurie." And I thought that was odd, because I was still very naive to this whole perception. You know, I thought maybe I was the Johnny-come-lately, and he's a learned scholar. He's gone to seminary, or cemetery, no, seminary. He's gone to seminary, so he studied all this about Israel, and he knows what God says. They read what the Apostle Paul said in Romans, that God's gift to Israel is irrevocable. Well, what does irrevocable mean? If not irrevocable. So anyhow, there is a problem within Christianity, and unfortunately, even as I said, in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, I went to pick up my daughter from school one day, and I have several bumper stickers on the back of my car, and one of them is quite funny, but they were walking out, these 5 boys were walking out of my daughter's school, and I was parked in the front. The back end of the Suburban was facing toward the school doors, and the boys were looking at the bumper stickers on my car, and they were laughing. And I thought, oh, I know which one they're laughing at. So I thought. But the car was on, it was running, the air conditioner's blowing, it was hot, it was in September. And the boys walked past my vehicle, and they got about 20, 30 feet from me. And 2 of the boys, the 5, did this to me. Again. This is the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. You know those boys were in a Sunday school or youth program the Sunday before or the Sunday after that incident. Where are these kids learning it? Is it being taught in church? Is it being taught in their textbooks? Is it being taught in both?
And at home.
And at home. This is a problem. And if we do not believe God's word and his covenant and his promise, then we're not going to stand with Israel. We're going to look for every excuse to blame them and accuse them, like we see happening. Next.
This is not a question, but it's more uplifting than some of the things I've been hearing. CUFI, Christians United for Israel, under John Hagee, made up a separate group that is going to be fighting the BDS. So maybe you can elaborate.
Yes. Yeah, that was just announced this week that Pastor Hagee is going to start a C4 organization, which will be more politically based, and they will become more active in fighting BDS, and also I think they're setting up an office in Washington, D.C., so that they'll have a presence on Capitol Hill as well. So I think that's a new development, but remember, evangelical Christians still are, still split on this issue. As you saw some of the images of the people that were, Willow Creek, Lynn Hybels and Bill Hybels from Willow Creek Church. These are also tremendous leaders. So, and they influence a lot of people. You saw Wheaton College. ORU is another problem. We're losing the colleges, the universities where they were solid on scripture teaching, and they're falling for this false narrative. Next, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that I did speak to each member of the Seminole County School Board about textbooks, because I got several phone calls about it. And each one of them are church members. They go to the churches and they say there's no way that they would be promoting Islam in the textbooks. They said in 7th grade, they teach about Judaism, its history is in. It's a continuum, so they teach in the 7th grade about Judaism and Christianity, and then in the 8th grade, they teach about Islam. So that's what they're telling
Right.
me.
The problem is, think about that. Think about that, okay? Let's just logically break this down, okay? So we're going to dedicate 1 year to 6th grade. Was it 6th grade? I think is it 7th grade? I thought it was 6th grade. They're teaching, 6th grade they're teaching Christianity and Judaism. And then when you hop up to 7th grade, You know, the 11th, 12th year of an individual's life is very important. And these people know that. But they use the 7th grade year to teach about Islam. One religion. Now, when our kids are being taught about Christianity and Judaism, they're not coming home saying, Mom, I learned how to convert to Judaism or to Christianity today. But when they come home from their Islam class, they're learning how to make prayer rugs. They're learning how to pray the Shahada prayer. We have one graphic, a PowerPoint, where the Council on American Islamic Relations is used in a PowerPoint, which is an instructional material approved to be used to teach Islam in the state of Tennessee. And I'm sure you all remember the Council on American Islamic Relations, because they were listed as an unindicted co-conspirator by our federal government in one of the largest terrorist fundraising operations in the history of the United States. So what in the world are we doing? Who approved to use instructional materials from CARE? How does this happen? That's why it's so critically important. If you feel like your heart is being pulled toward fighting this textbook battle, you've got to get the textbooks and just start with the history books. Get a 7th grade textbook. Get a high school textbook. Take it home and read through, and just open up to the section where it talks about comparative religions and look at how the religions are compared. 37 pages, like I said, dedicated to Islam, 13 to Christianity, 17 to Judaism. Judaism is the oldest religion faith on the planet. If any book should have the majority of pages, it should be Judaism because of its long history. Then Christianity, because remember, Islam didn't come along till later. That's good. So tomorrow night, if you're interested in learning more about what's in the textbooks here in Seminole County, and how many counties are represented? Are there Orange County here? Okay, it doesn't matter if you're from Seminole or Orange or any of the other surrounding counties. Come and get educated. And that way you can go back to your county and you can start asking questions. Start with your school board members and ask them what they know about Common Core and about these textbooks. And all you have to do before you go in to speak with them, like I said, go to your local high school or middle school, get the history book. They're all stacked there, nobody's using them. And I don't know when school starts, but ask them if you can check out a textbook. If they tell you no, you contact your state representative.
No, you can check them out, but you have to put down the cost of the book.
Okay, well, you can check them out. In Tennessee, it is a law. Nobody can be denied, and that's one of the things that they've been trying to do. They're trying to keep the instructional materials, the tests, the textbooks from leaving the building because they're afraid if the parents see what's really in them, that they just might be upset. Imagine that. So you've got to fight this battle at the local level, and you've got to start building relationships. You've got to show up at school board meetings. How many of you go to school board meetings? It's got to be more. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, this is so serious. There are men and women who have died and shed their blood on battlefields so that we could have the freedoms that we have. And I'm telling you, if we don't start taking back, we're fighting a short war and a long war. The short war is confronting the textbooks and the curriculum being used in Common Core in our schools, and also confronting the BDS on our college campuses. But the long war is it's going to take us a couple generations, and we have to start, and the only way it's going to change is if we change the textbooks that are being used to teach our children and demand that our textbooks are historically accurate. They are unbiased. If you think that I'm not expressing how serious this problem is, it's 10 times worse than what I'm communicating to you. And he's exactly right. When you start looking at these textbooks and you realize these kids in Tennessee, this one textbook has already been used for 6 years. Well, we couldn't get rid of the textbook. We got Pearson to pull the quote, but the line about Israel being accused of occupying Palestinian land is still in there. And they're still anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, pro-Marxist, pro-communist, pro-Islam. Do you see how our country is changing? Our Judeo-Christian values, and ladies and gentlemen, don't let them shame you. Our Judeo-Christian values have made this nation the free nation that it is, that allows everyone, no matter what race, creed, color they come from, no matter what religion, everyone is welcome here to worship as they see fit. And if we don't fight for that, there is no freedom under Sharia. And that's what they're trying to get this country to. And they reflect the values of our community. Do you see the parallels going on here? And this hit me when I got into the textbook issue and how we're reframing our American history. Look at how we are reframing our faith, Christianity, Judaism. We're removing the things and we're compromising on the truths that have always been there. We're watering down the truths. And so within Christianity, if we don't build our faith on the Hebrew roots of our faith, on the Torah, on the prophets, if we don't build our foundation there, I have people who won't even read. In fact, in the Palestinian area, they won't even use an Old Testament. They use a New Testament, and the reason why they only use New Testaments is because the Old Testament is too Zionist. If you don't know where you've come from, how can you know where you're going? How can you know who you are? Well, let me just clarify too. If you look at the Israeli voter and the elections, we all know that Obama tried to throw the elections in Israel and throw Bibi. Look at the majority of them supported the Prime Minister. If you look, there is a dichotomy here with the Jewish community, but I believe that's changing. But now let's bring it to Christianity, because think about it. Judaism, or the Jews, do not have the votes to affect an election. They're still they're less than 1% of the overall population around the world. Who has the largest population? Christians. We should know our Bibles. We should be able to go into a voting booth and know who the candidates are and where they stand on these issues. Are they going to be willing to defend our faith?
That's exactly right.
The economic boycott is a problem, and the federal government is addressing that issue. 2 state legislatures have introduced resolutions to penalize anyone within those states doing or preventing to do business with Israel. They would be penalized legally. But our resolution is really a tool that we're using to educate people, to educate grassroots Christians, people of conscience, because Israel's battle, it will ultimately affect us. Because if U.S. businesses are forced to boycott and not do business because the EU has decided they're going to boycott Israeli businesses, it will ultimately affect us. We don't realize as citizens the impact that Israel has, being a light to the nations, on the rest of the world. The advancements in technology, in medicine, in the arts, we get all of that in agriculture. We get a lot of those advancements from the nation of Israel. Israel is a blessing to the world, but most people do not know that. I'm going to tell you that each one of you should be going out and you should be getting people to register to vote, and then making sure that your community gets out and votes. You have to make sure that people register and then go vote. And they've got to vote their Bible. What does the Word of God say? Because remember, there's 2 scriptures I want to kind of wrap up with, and I'd be happy to take a couple more questions. This gentleman back here and this lady right here. But I want to remind you, God told the prophet Joel that in the latter days, he was going to wipe out the nations of the world because they were dividing up his land. What land was that? Was it the United States? Israel. Which nation is leading the charge to divide the land of Israel in the last days? We are a Judeo-Christian nation. How in the world did we do this to ourselves? Where we would go against God's word and divide his land. Think about that. Here's another verse I want you to think about, out of the book of Obadiah. God told the prophet Obadiah that in the last days he was going to wipe out the descendants of Edom because they stood by while their brother Jacob was held in captivity and they did nothing. Jacob is also translated to Israel. Now let's look back in history. Who stood by during the Holocaust when Israel was held in captivity? Who's standing by today? And it's not just our Jewish brethren now that the Christians are standing by, it's Christians. How does this happen? You know, faith without works is no faith at all. None of us can leave here tonight and not do something. Each one of you came here tonight not because you thought it was a great idea, but because God chose for you to be here before the foundations of the earth. And to whom much is given, much will be required. And we know God doesn't hold us responsible for the things that we don't know, but he will hold us responsible for the things we do know and what we won't do about it. There isn't anybody else that's going to fight this battle, ladies and gentlemen. It's us. And each one of you, within your respective groups, whether it's BDS, whether it's the textbooks, you should be forming groups of committees to attend these meetings and then have weekly or monthly meetings to report back about your findings so that you then can go and organize and mobilize your community. I'm telling you, it works. All it takes is one person to be faithful. Remember the words of Isaiah. He may be. When he heard Hashem, the Lord Almighty, from his throne say, "Whom shall I send, and who will go on our behalf?"